about being rich, but it did it in a remarkably human way. So I want to toss this out with a question to everybody, and you people can chime in as you wish. Did you like the people, even the ones who weren't perfect? You know, how did you feel about them? Did you take sides in the beginning? Did your loyalty change as the plot got deeper, up until the car accident? That's like the first hour. Anybody want to take that on? Marina.
Thank you, Jim, for choosing such thought-provoking films for us. For me, I want to sympathize with the main character, but he's so controversial that I end up not liking him. And everybody in the movie, if it's not an outright villain, is a shady person in some way.
But isn't that interesting that they're all people? You know, they're easy to disapprove of, but they're also kind of easy to like, except for maybe the mongoose, the enforcer for the family, who's never says anything nice. Anybody else? Susan, you're muted.
Yeah, I think that Balaam, I really liked him in the beginning because he had aspirations and he tried very hard to build a better life for himself the right way, as we say. And, you know, he, like when he had when he killed the person by accident, he was very remorseful. I mean, that was, I think that.
When did he kill a person by accident?
When was it? Okay. I have terrible memory.
She was driving the car.
She was.
Oh,
he was driving the car. And that goes to the root of his being just a pawn in the game of this wealthy, powerful family.
Yes. Oh, well, that for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, he really tried, you know, I think he went to the family with good intentions. I'm not sure he knew the extent of their corruption when he went there, and then he got sucked into it. It was very sad.
He was he was a naif from the countryside. Yes. You know, they ate on the ground with nothing, you know, and the family ties were very important. And to him, he thought he was pursuing a code of honor to be a servant to a powerful, wealthy person.
Yeah.
This was dignified and honorable, like an English butler, or you think of, in Remains of the Day, you think of Anthony Hopkins, who's the head of household, or any of the people in upstairs, downstairs. It's a system of oppression, yet they participate in it because they find meaning in adhering to this honor code.
The code, yeah.
It's kind of, forgive me for getting brainiac on you. There was a Jewish philosopher in Europe named Bergson, Bergson, and he had a system of what's worthy of human pursuit. And the first pursuit, he said, was hedonic code, hedonism, which it means we worship and pursue our senses, the rewards of the senses, whether it's food or sex or even art or beauty or the endorphins of being a long distance runner. That's the first and lowest level of mission. He also described life as a jet, a stream coming out of an enclosed container, breaking out. That was life, the jet stream of steam. The second level of justification for our existence was accordance to a code, like Balaram had, to be servant to a master and to think of their needs before yours was not only dignified, it was a calling, it was honorable, it was prestigious. Besides, he'd earned enough money to buy his grandmother a water buffalo, and she'd not only be the richest woman in the village, but the proudest. So, you know, it's like people have different triggers, they have different carrots, to chase after. And it entirely depends upon where you're coming from. Balaram had no idea what he was in for when he arrived in Delhi, or even the first city, I forget the name of it, on their way there.
Bangalore. Was it Bangalore? The
No,
first city?
it wasn't. Bangalore's what he went to at the end. It was, I mean, maybe Risa can help us, but it's like Dalanbad, something like that. It's probably half the way from his village to Delhi. The point is that we're all not.
Bangalore is a city where I'm going to forget the word. The people who do the call out centers. It's a huge industrial city.
Call center. Okay.
Call centers.
All right. But that was booming, and this film was made a few years ago. By the way, it was nominated for Best Screenplay. It shows you the status of the quality of this writing, and I want to cover that. But my point is that all of us came from somewhere. We were acculturated in the home and the city we grew up in, and then perhaps many of us moved elsewhere. But there's a bit of a culture shock. And as we know, people their identities can change, their sense of self can change as they assimilate, for better or for worse. Or maybe it's just no different. You find yourself the same person, just with different accoutrement later in life. That's not the point. The point is he had no idea what he was in for. You're right, Susan. Neither the corruption, the manipulation, the exploitation of people, or the cruelty. He thought this was his ticket to what would be a better life for himself and his family back home, and perhaps the one he wanted. But what do we know? Because remember, the whole film is told in a narrative flashback where he's commenting on every situation he's in. And he's commenting on it with hindsight, right? So his explanations are very candid about what he thought, but he's very condemning about this notion of servitude, and did anybody else get the sense that we make ourselves slaves is a theme of this until we break out? It's kind of through it all. Even Pinky, the wife, realizes that. But let's go back to the beginning. And I want to talk about how novelistic this film is, even though it has a narration, and we tend to frown upon narrations because they tell the audience what to feel. I noticed in the first 20 minutes, he was narrating what the life of a peasant in the village was like and how the caste system functioned on them. And he's talking, but he's showing you visual illustrations of the life of the village. And it starts with, by the way, Jews weren't mentioned, but he said there's 36 million gods in India. There's the Hindu gods. There's only one Muslim god. There are 3 Christian gods. So that makes 36 million and 4. Very funny line. It's I wasn't offended that he, and I didn't remember any of this, but see, the more you watch something, the deeper into it you get, and you realize what he's doing with this. He's explaining where is the absence of spirituality? Where is spirituality in any of this? Is it really about anything that has anything to do with any religion? And that is Bergson's third level of existence, where you leave the aspiration to live up to an honor code to the spiritual code that you aspire to, which is something outside yourself. So those are like 3 philosophical, quasi-religious distinctions he makes in the progress of man and in what we can achieve as individuals. And he says at the end of the introduction, he says it pays to play it both ways, to be an atheist and a believer in all these 36 million gods. You have to be the straight and the crooked. You have to be mocking and you have to believe at the same time. These words tend to pass through you. You've all heard them and seen them, but I'm trying to refresh your memory of how he's setting himself up as a complicated, conflicted person.
But I found he was a very intelligent person.
Yes, absolutely.
More intelligent than all the people around him.
Right. And what we've seen, and we see this in a lot of the Jewish films, that sometimes the foreigner has a better take on the current reality. In The Survivor, about the boxer who fought in the camps and then goes to Brooklyn and, winds up seeking out his ex-wife. He brings more understanding of what it's like to be an expat or assimilated than the people who are assimilated around him. And we've seen that in other films. And it works in the other direction as well, where I think of Song of Names, which is one of my all-time favorites, where Clive Owen, out of this pain of losing his family in the Holocaust, goes deeper into Hasidism because he doesn't want to see that culture for what it is. He wants to be buried in a closed belief system. Right? So neither conforms to Bergson's theory of, the three levels of spirituality or of human concern. But that letter, that narration is all about the letter. He's explaining himself to the business leader of China. This humble street kid, who is now a millionaire in India, thinks there's something to be learned from my history, my lesson. And that's how he concludes his letter to Jaibo, the prime minister. So the hubris, what makes you think that your story is any more important than anybody else's? Well, it's a movie, and the filmmaker's trying to make the case that his story is really important. Because he says, what he says at the end? He says, the story of my life is the story of India. All the contradictions, and I know, Risa, you can address this because you spent real time there. It is a land of contradictions. Just like my friends who saw the sewage in the street and were disgusted by India, and you saw the cleanliness of their homes and said, oh my God, this is a land of contradictions. Isn't it great? The people themselves are fascinating and wonderful. So it's a matter of how you see things. And his path through this movie is a matter of how does he see himself? We're taking a journey through his education as a young man into the whole world. I see some hands up. Risa, you first, since I've been nagging you, and then Frank and Yvette.
It's important to realize that the Indian Hindus believe firmly that if they follow the rules of their current status, they will be reincarnated at a higher level. So they're not just concerned with what's going on today. They're concerned with being the best they can be at that level and accepting it so that they can come back in the next life. And that's a very important part of their thinking. The other thing I want to say is you have to remember that the fellow in the where he was sleeping was also of that caste, but he had risen to the level of understanding what was going on and tried to help Balaam understand what was going to happen and to be very careful so that there was a hierarchy within the drivers as well.
Right.
So
good point. I want to go, let's hit that one first. And that is his idea of success was to save up enough money to buy a home in a small village. So that was his goal, not necessarily spiritual second level. But your first comment again was?
About the Hindu religion.
Oh, okay. So wishing in an afterlife that you'll be better, right? Doesn't this
Not
correspond
wishing, working for it.
Working for it and believing it. Okay. But isn't this the great American myth of exceptionalism and the Horatio Alger myth that anybody can go from rags to riches? How we're a land of equal opportunity if you only work hard enough and play by the rules. It's hard to claim that we are a land of equal opportunity after, several hundred years. And we have so much injustice and so much bigotry and racism and discrimination and intellectual dishonesty among the lawmakers. So there's a parallel. I don't see that as excusing the lower caste people of aspiring. I think aspiring is something you cannot help to do when you're thrown into a new environment, because the differences between you and the new environment are so raw and so abrasive and can make you feel so small by comparison that, of course, you want to not feel small anymore, and you want to achieve what everybody else has. Does that make sense? So again, it's this business of an afterlife and reincarnation, and it's doing it to my reform mind, my non-believing mind. It's doing it for the wrong reasons. We have to be good because it's good to be good in the present. You know,
with what's going on in India.
Let's not talk about India.
But what they say is that the people who are living in the high rises and are well-to-do do not see the people who are living in the street, do not see them. And in reverse, the people who are living in the streets and in the slums do not see the people who are living in the other lifestyle. How can you say that? But that's how they survive.
Well,
the rich and the poor both survive.
Right,
that way.
but that's what happens when you assimilate. You see, you begin to ignore. One can ignore their past, their family, where they've come from, because it hurts too much. And when you recognize that difference, it's like, how many will be crusaders and fix it the way this guy tried to do? I'm not saying he's
Very
innocent.
few.
Right. So it's humans are subject to seduction like that, to chasing after something they think they want or need. You know, this is a primary failing we have, and people, rich or poor, are exploited by it. You know, the family was just as damaged by their own greed. The subplot is bribing the socialist official who's running for office because she wants bribes to save them from coal taxes. And they say, oh, well, she wants so much, maybe it'd be better if we paid off her opponents to get her defeated in the election. I mean, it makes the head spin how relevant that is. So it's like the Democrats supporting campaigns in primaries in the last election, you know, to try and rig the primary election for president, to have elected the most heinous, awful people, to give an increasingly bad name to the Republican Party for independents and Democrats. So there's hypocrisy all around, you know, everywhere. And, you know, that's why I love movies like this, because I never thought of that until this moment. But it's the same thing. You know, it's like people are it's not everybody, but there is a tendency in I got to be PC about this, or woke, excuse me. Human beings have a tendency to be greedy and to pursue their own needs before they see anybody else who may be in greater need. All right. And this film is about that. I mean, he had a need too, you know, but because he was, as Effie said, he was so smart, he had some objectivity on himself, and his upwardly mobile rise, as well as his keen insight into the people around him. He did have something to tell the Chinese prime minister. You know, he had to tell his staff at the end. He calls them outside. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Frank and Yvette. You're muted, Frank. You're still muted, Frank. You're speaking words of wisdom we're not getting. Lower left corner. Yvette, kick him.
Yes. Okay.
There you go. Oh, you went back again. Unmute. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I put my hand up originally some time ago when we were talking about the early part of the movie. Rather than the philosophical questions you've been discussing most recently, I'm going to ask a couple of technical things. First of all, we're talking about early influence on someone. The mother in someone's life usually is portrayed as someone who has a great influence. In this case, we know about the father and how close he was, and who dies of tuberculosis at an early age, and the grandmother, who's an unusual personality there in her domineering and demanding ways. Nothing about the mother that I can recall. Did I miss something?
I don't think you did. I didn't see it either. I wondered about that. But correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that village life is quite matriarchal. I
Well,
could be wrong.
It definitely showed it.
Teresa?
It
Well,
definitely showed
that
it.
one was,
but-
but she was the matriarch. She demanded the money. Her other grandson was the enforcer, Balaram's brother. And because it's harder to deny a woman than another man.
Yeah, and
when you're a man.
question- yeah.
Go ahead.
The other question I have, technical, is that I don't know how it enhanced the film at all, but we're shown early on the accident without knowing where someone is killed, without knowing its relevance or how it fits into the plot. I don't understand how that enhanced the film at all, because rather than having it just occur in a linear way as he's telling the story. I'm not sure of why that was. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I wondered too, and he says, well, this is like the prayer before prayer to a higher power. I question it too. And how did other people feel about it? Was that abbreviated preamble necessary? Did it add to it when you finally saw the car scene? Did it feel differently because you'd seen it before? Effie's shaking his head no. Is that all we get from you, Effie?
Oh, yeah, because it made me think while I was watching a movie, why'd they show that? Why'd they show that? Why did they show that?
Okay, and then when it became important, because you'd seen the development up to that scene, did it become more important, or you could have done without it?
I could have done about the first one.
Yeah, I question it too, Frank. You're not alone there. It's a pretty stunning scene anyway. And you could have been cut off, it was over 2 hours and 4 minutes, so it wouldn't have hurt it. And once you get past that, the early scenes of him as a boy working in the tea shop or being expelled from school because his father didn't pay the taxes, right? He can read English, unlike the other boys, and he's going to get a scholarship. So that's the aspirational quality that this boy has. That was fascinating in itself, and how mean the teacher was to the other students, but not to him.
I think the other strong point of the film is how it shows, and in a good, both from a writing standpoint and acting standpoint, the gradual change in him from this innocent kid to becoming the almost ruthless person and aggressive entrepreneur he becomes at the end, that as he's corrupted by the system.
Right, there you go. Yeah. Okay, Judy and then Iris. Judy and then Iris. Sorry. It's too dark there to see.
Okay, there, I got it. Okay. So I wanted to respond to the question about showing the accident in the beginning. I unfortunately only saw the first hour. And the reason is that I started watching it night before last, but it got late and I got tired and I said, I'll watch the rest tomorrow. But I was using a friend's Netflix password and I got booted off yesterday.
They're doing that
mid-movie. I couldn't believe it. So as somebody who only saw the first hour, I'm kind of glad that I got to see it because it gave me a preview of what might be coming up. And I'm looking forward to finding out more from the discussions in this class.
Okay, good. Thank you. Iris?
Yeah. What I thought about that scene, that initial scene, was I linked it to the beginning. When he begins to narrate, he says that he was a murderer. And so I thought maybe that scene was a foreshadowing of what happened that made him call himself a murderer. And then when we got to the scene, the actual accident, when she hits him, I thought, well, if he's not the murderer, then what is going to happen? I thought it was an effort to build suspense about what was going to happen to him in the movie. That was, I thought it was a device.
It was some kind of device, he thought, but I don't think it was meant to distract us. I did not hear. There was a tone of apology in his narration of his letter. He said, "Don't judge me now." Right, but maybe I missed it because I was taking notes. I don't recall him saying I was a murderer.
He actually called himself a murderer.
I see. Okay. Well, maybe that's the justification for showing it, to show how could somebody like that become a murderer? Somebody innocent who tried to stop the accident. And, it's a great opening scene. It's action. He's dressed like a Maharaja. It's like enigmatic. Who are these people? How did he get there? It makes you ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And they're answered by the first hour of the movie. But I still question, why is it there? But then again, it may have made me feel totally differently had I heard I'm a murderer. Joel and his arm candy there. I'm sorry, I forget your name. Your girlfriend.
Are we unmuted?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, I thought that he was a survivor, and he was, we've already talked about how brave he was, but he was so ambitious to be able to do what he did, to leave the town and to go off.
Right.
And all of these things were things that he had never been exposed to before, the way these people lived. And I think that changed who he was and what his expectations were. But I also think that showing the accident in the beginning, that's the turning point in the movie.
Right.
And that when you get there, I almost thought, well, now it's going to be over. But then you realize there's, more to come. But that is the turning point, because then he realizes that even if he would be a loyal servant, that he was still going to be mistreated. And I think
you're right. I think you're right.
When things turn, when he is completely disillusioned, this is his epiphany.
Right.
That something has to, that he has to start thinking in a different way.
Well, it doesn't happen at the moment of the accident.
No.
Because remember, he says, no, get back in the car. Nothing good can come from this. And he even signs the document confessing that he was the only person in the car and drove it.
But that's when he understands that.
No, he doesn't understand in that moment. He understands later. And we'll get to that moment. So make me discuss it when we get there, if you don't mind. He still believes in that honor code of serving your masters. He knows it's wrong. You see his reaction as he reads it. This doesn't correspond to the reality I know. But he signs it, reluctantly. It's too much for him to process. Risa?
Right now I'm sitting here confused. Did we see a movie, or did I read a book about the Eritrean doctor?
Yes.
Was it a book? Judy?
Oh, I'm not muted. Yes, it was a book.
Yeah, it was a book.
We read it in my book group. It was an Israeli book.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was a movie or not.
Yeah, I can't remember the name.
The thing that was important about it is that when you kill someone in India on the street like that, there's a very small chance that anybody is going to be searching for who killed her. She's nothing. She's lower class and one of billions, and her death was supposed to be, in his mind, forgotten.
Right. By the way, one of the things I liked about that scene was as she's driving recklessly, Pinky, and he's having a good time, they drive past a family of homeless people sitting around a fire in the median street. And they cut to Balram next in a close-up where he recognizes them. And it's a look of compassion of there, but for the grace of God go I. Oh my God, who are these people? And then it turns out to be one of them that Pinky hits. So I thought that was an acknowledgement of his humanity. He knew there was something not right about the situation. And
His
that's,
job
I think,
was
one
to
of the reasons
protect
why we
his
like
people. His job
What?
was to protect his people.
his own people. Right. Again, it's that honor code he's upholding and think that's where my own salvation, that will bring me out of this horrible village life. And whether it's into the next life or whether he can have a little shack, outside of Delhi, is he's not even thinking that far ahead. It's just it's this vague aspirational goal. It's ambition, but it's blind ambition because he doesn't know the cost of pursuing it. Effie and then Susan.
Well, if you recognize later when he has his own company and one of his drivers kills somebody, it says he's not the driver's fault, it's my fault. So I thought that was, he carried over something that was beautiful.
The mensch, let's face it, if it were that family, they'd cover that murder up, that accident up sooner. And he not only says, here's 40,000 rupees to the family, and I'll take your son and make him a driver in my company.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, he's trying to make it right. It's a good film for Yom Kippur. You have to make things right with human beings, whom you've wronged. Your business with God is yours. As long as you pay for the new roof in the synagogue, you're okay. It's all about the here and now. Be a good person. I've told that joke before, Risa. You don't have to laugh at it again.
It's not a
For
joke.
those of you who haven't heard it before, I get to tell it again. So there are these two guys sitting in shul, and one guy leans over to his friend next to him and says, "You see that man over there? He's an atheist." And the friend says, "I don't care what he is, as long as he's paid for the new roof." That's between him and God. And it's the pragmatism of just being decent, and it's somewhere buried in all of us. Whether you're the grandmother who just wants the money to support her clan and her status in the clan, whether it's the father, Ashok's father, who just wants to maintain his fealty in the state, and his position of power and wealth. Everybody is watching out to maintain the status quo, except for Balram, because that teacher, that mean teacher who was so cruel to another boy, said to him, "You're a white tiger. You're one in a generation, right? Because you taught yourself how to read. I'm going to see to it that you get a scholarship to a school in the big city." That would be fraught with a lot of other things, and we've seen movies like that before as well. But the problem is that dream is waylaid because his father can't pay the school teacher anymore. So he's booted out of school and he loses his endorsement. So even at the lowest village level, this sense of one hand helps the other, one hand pays off the other, they pay it forwards, but, looking back into who they're beholden to or who they don't have to be beholden to because they didn't pay. This is a slice of humanity at all levels. Now, it's not a major part of this movie, but that village life is very telling. It operates with its own hierarchy. Marina. Susan first and then Marina.
Marina wrote something in the chat.
I was going to call that out.
And I sort of had the same feeling, and maybe that's what they kind of wanted to do in the film. When we say in Hebrew that I never get the words right, but you have the good side and the bad side. Help me out, Risa. Yetzirah and you have.
Oh, but you just threw it out of my head. Wait a minute.
Ask the cat. Ask the cat. No.
Hara.
Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara.
Thank you. In other
Thank
words,
you, Hannah. Wow.
I get the feeling when he wanted the money from his grandmother, he kind of shined her on and said, "I'm going to get you a cow," but really he wanted it for himself. He wanted to better himself. Okay. So I think that you have this going on the whole time. The other thing, I kind of got the feeling when he was Mr. Goody Two Shoes with the family, he was putting on that behavior.
Yeah, sure.
And
Yeah.
I think that he wasn't all good and he wasn't all bad, but he definitely had the ambition, which seemed to, as the movie progressed, seemed to take over, especially after the accident, when he realized that he'd been manipulated, and they really,
Right.
when it came to family was more important than how he had been loyal.
Does this remind anybody of The Great Gatsby, where Gatsby became a victim of his own ambition? Right? He was just this kid from the Midwest who, the backstory is interesting. I won't go into it, but he wanted to be like the people in West Egg and the wealthy brokers of Manhattan. He was so aspirational, he had to invent a history for himself as a bootlegger, and lavish parties, and the bootlegging was just, I mean, that's probably how he made his money. He's a fictional character, but the point is, ultimately, his girlfriend's husband shoots him at the end because no good can come from this, and again, this is back to that slice of life where human beings do this to each other, regardless of the level of society they're on. There is a hierarchy of one-upsmanship and debt and what can I get away with and how can I scam a few minutes of time or a few dollars from somebody. It's human nature. We seek advantage for ourselves, and unless you become an ascetic monk or nun, in some kind of religious community, and deprive yourself of everything, including desire, none of us can live that way. And it's an ideal life, and believe me, there was plenty, as we've learned, plenty of corruption in convents and monasteries. Marina.
I want to bring to your attention the fact that he doesn't hesitate to step on other people as he goes up in life.
Right.
He caused the dismissal of the first driver by revealing that he was a hidden Muslim. And I didn't see it in the movie, but I would be surprised if that driver's family was sitting homeless in that on that road. Well, it probably not, but when you mentioned that he paid attention to it, I know it's just a homeless family, but what if he recognized someone in that group? This is a very low kind of behavior. He's not just stealing; he's stealing person's livelihood.
He sees himself in them. There's a pang of guilt, and I shouldn't be having such a good time when these people are so desperate on the street. It's lots of things come back. But that, it's funny how one look can sort of encapsulate a whole frame of mind. That did for me, and it was one of those redeeming things about him. Iris, did you have something more you wanted to add?
Yeah, I did want to say one more thing, and about you've used pointed out that he's a victim of human nature, and that always brings me to the Jewish concept that we are constantly fighting our good inclinations and our evil inclinations. And this fella was just a piece of conflicted,
right,
human being.
Yeah.
And I spent most of the movie feeling sorry for him until he finally is overwhelmed by his evil inclination to kill his.
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because forgive me for just asking the question. Is it really evil what he was feeling then? What precedes that is he takes the nephew from the village to the zoo, and he sees the white tiger. And he sees examples of beauty while there are flashes of his previous life, his father, his grandmother. He comes to a point to realize where he can be free. And he quotes somebody who said, when you can perceive beauty, you realize what freedom really is. Because you're not thinking of your master, your own soul, your own body, your own history is telling you this is beautiful and you are being moved by it. I mean, we've all, when we see great films or ballets or art, you know, or signs of decency among our family members, you're moved, you know, and you can't help it. And that's the human soul that films like this can touch. And we know that experience. I go to the movies to reproduce that experience in as many ways as I possibly can. What am I trying to say with this? It's like, yes, he's aspirational. He's a victim of his own desires and his own ambition and doesn't know where they're going to take him. But he never loses that objectivity about the journey he's on. And the question is, was he really evil? I think in his narration over the when he even breaks the whiskey glass in the garage of the hotel, he's talking about what he's about to do. And it's like, it's not, to him, it's not evil. He's putting an end to history. He thinks he is in some small way. He's empowering himself. Now, you know, were the guys who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, you know, behaving with the same kind of altruism? Yeah, but this is a movie and it's not a riot. He's acting out of a sense of idealism because he's looking at himself and say, oh my God, these people have used and abused me and they're going to keep on doing it. And the only way for me to get out of here is to take my chance at freedom, which is to take that final biggest payment of 4 million rupees from him and make sure he doesn't live to tell the story that I got it and disappear and create a new life for myself so that I can make things a little bit better. So this raises the age-old question. Does the end justify the means? And the corollary to that is, are we human beings capable of making those moves? Okay, Iris, I see you shaking your head, but think of all the, you know, can we think of things? I can't right now, where horrible things were done in the name of justice and freedom, such as the Allied invasion of Normandy. But you know, it's like we commit atrocities to stop other atrocities. We saw the film about the Jewish partisans who fought in the forests of Poland, called The Four Winters. And these people never believed they could kill another human at all. They were just simple Jewish people who weren't politically active. They just wanted to save themselves and their family, but they reached a point where they changed because they approached that precipice where they had to make a choice. And the issue is, could he have not killed the guy? Could he have walked away from the 4 million rupees? Yes, he could have. He chose not to. They don't psychoanalyze him enough in the movie for me to say why. You know, I think the movie just takes the position of this guy is doing this to stop the chain of abuse. You know, it's like a woman whose husband has beaten her and the children forever, finally takes a gun and shoots him. Is that self-defense or is it murder? You know, we're in a very gray area here. And I think the movie enjoys playing there. When I first saw this film, I actually asked Risa, our resident Indian scholar, to see it. And I was very worried that it would offend people because he committed a murder at the end. And I don't know if you remember our conversation, Risa, but I talked around my fear. And you said, no, it felt like a legitimate Indian movie. It was true to their society. And, you know, and you said, no, show it to the group. And I said, I put it out of my mind. And then in my wanderings, you know, over my list of 700 films, I said, I better watch this again. And then I did. And I realized, holy shit, you know, there's really something there. And then I watched it a third time today and I said, wow, this is really good. And then when I realized it was Ramin Bahrani who did 99 Homes and the man who sold his skin, it's like, whoa, this man is onto something. He's relentless. By the way, he went to Columbia College, not Columbia College of Movie Making, but Columbia University in New York. This is a smart guy.
So did I.
And that's why 99 Homes had so much validity to it, because he got the speech, he got the cadences, he got the motivations of the American poor people who were evicted and the greedy Americans who were evicting. You know, he doesn't do things, he's not imagining a foreign world. This is the world he came from. He was born in a big metropolis in India. So let's talk about that. Was it justice? Did he save lives by killing the guy and rescuing all his drivers and setting up a company that was compassionate to its employees? How do you feel about that? Who hasn't spoken? Effie, come back and talk to us some more. And then Doris. Effie.
I think Anne was before me.
Okay, thank you. Anne, where's Anne? Anne Heyman, hi.
Hi.
Go ahead, Anne.
Well, I think his whole behavior has to be viewed partially in the context of the culture and the country that he is living in. Somewhere in the movie, he says he realizes that there are only two important things, crime and politics. I think he says that toward the end.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether this movie would have worked if it were not in a country like India, with the tremendous dichotomy of rich and poor, everything that we know about India. I mean, this was a man who was like in a cage, like the tiger, who had no opportunity to get himself out of the situation he was in and had no other choice. I mean, here in this country, we have choices. He had no choice.
Kimberly, maybe you'd like to comment on that? Excuse me. You can say no. I do mean to put you on the spot.
You
but then
meant on the comment about we have choices in America?
Yeah.
Some of us have choices in America, but
Okay,
I
well,
just want to throw out, I thought the most interesting character was Pinky. She was so
yes.
complicated that I still don't know how I feel about her.
Yeah. Interestingly, she grew up in the States, although she was born in India, but she's a card-carrying Indian, you know, but totally American feminist, you know, totally, you know, they met in grad school. What can I say? You know, and while she watched her mother, you know, get robbed at gunpoint in their bodega. No, I think, and this is what all the good films we see do, regardless of where they're set, they relate to something universal. So no, and it wouldn't translate literally into our country, but think of The Godfather, which is about a guy inside the family who is trying to turn the arc of the family away from crime. You know, before his wife leaves him, he says, I think I can turn this around and we'll be done with all the crime stuff in another generation, you know, and she leaves him anyway, because it's, you know, it's a sickness you're trapped in. But the point is, it may be India, but it's relevant to human nature. They have tapped by drilling down deep to a granular level of what it means to be a rich and a poor Indian, and some in between. They have drilled down into our own humanity because we find things to connect to relate to, just like Balram seeing the family on the median strip. By the way, I wanted to say that where does he learn that it's a jungle? The guy who teaches in the driving school in the small town on his way to Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
He says, it's a jungle out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got it. This is how you know, curse at the other driver who tries to cut you off. And then he repeats it and he does it again. And then the wealthy family chastises him for doing it. So it percolates through a system. You know, we all have it at every level, whether you're a driving instructor in a medium-sized city, you know, or you're in New Delhi playing with the heavyweight politicos. It's so resonant. It touches on so much. So I'm not trying to pick a fight with you, Ann. I think that the virtue of it is that we can look at it seriously because we're not Indian. We have no skin in that game to defend or criticize. We can only say, how did each individual's dilemma and the actions they decided to take strike us?
But
And
I
how did
mean,
we-
India has that rigid caste system. It explains partially the way each group's treated each other
Could be,
group.
yes, yeah. Yeah, and
That
so do
is-
the Brits.
That is, in my opinion, unique to India. Now, we know we all have injustice and issues and problems, but it seems to me that that rigid caste system plays in the background to some extent, the way he's treated among, sitting around that living room and people hitting him and all of that, as if he were just an
No,
object.
it's not in the background. It's in that, you're right. It's in the foreground. He is perceived as less than their humanity. So they can abuse him the way they would not abuse one another. You're absolutely right. My point is that this points out to how we do this in other ways in our own society. And that, as we heard, it depends on who you are, how you feel about the society around you and how you've been treated. And we're watching this kid's education. It's the education of a young man. That's a famous autobiography of one of the Adams brothers, one of the founding fathers. And all the conservatives take it as a benchmark of American character. But I digress. It's like, find the universal in this granular slice of Indian life. Susie?
A character that we haven't mentioned that I thought was pretty interesting was the guy who he killed. Shoot, was that his name?
Shock, yeah.
Pinky's husband. He was kind of on the rim of hating the way his relatives treated Baram and going along with it. He would say to his family, don't do that. Are you doing this? Are you kicking him? Stop it, and whatever. And I didn't quite understand his nature, that he would have not wanted to leave with Pinky. Why he didn't go with her back to the US? Because
well, she wouldn't go with him. She'd had it because he'd already shown his colors by allowing his family to force Balram into signing that confession.
But supposedly at the end, she wanted to take him back. Remember he said at the end of the movie, I heard from Pinky, she called me, she wants me to come to the US.
Yeah, but don't you see, that's on her terms. That means leaving his family. The consequences in India for him, his family would cut him off. She's asking him to pick sides. And he can't, because he's Indian. You see, does it make sense?
I didn't think he was really happy in that life. He was a crook.
He wasn't. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. He wasn't happy, but he stuck to it. People don't make the best decisions for themselves or idealistic decisions. People get stuck in their ruts.
And I think he could have made it here in the US with her.
It would have taken too much. I mean, we can't write the script in advance. All we can say is that he was too entrenched in the family's ways to leave them now. Being part of the clan and the noblesse oblige that he was born into was more important than being her closest companion. That's all we can say. You can write the next screenplay if you want.
Okay, but in this story, was she, when we entered the film, was she planning to live with him forever in India? They were married.
No. There's a line, maybe you missed it. The agreement was they'd go to India for 6 months for him to catch up with his family, and then they'd return to New York. But then she complains to a cousin how he never wants to talk about it. And she tries to talk with him and he avoids it. So the ground is laid for him to go back on her own because he doesn't want to return. let's talk about her because she is a very interesting character. One, she's a great actor. But as an American-born woman, Indian-born, but coming into womanhood in America, in New York City, and seeing the same, her disdain for her parents' life, as honorable as that immigrant life was in the bodega, was like Balram seeing his village life. I don't want to go back there. I want to be educated. I aspire to more. I don't want it to be my life just because it was theirs. So he and Balram and Pinky are like soulmates. You know, they feed on each other. And what I love about her is that first scene when she steps in to the discussion with his father and the mongoose, and she talks back to the father, and she ends up slapping him for treating Balram that way. It's like, this is a vocal American woman with a voice of her own. This was great. And you know, the first time she speaks up is, no, Ashok and I will go to New Delhi and we'll pay off the opposition. She's with it. But then when the father kicks Balram away from massaging his legs, she's had it. That's the rift in the family. That the lines are drawn. She can never be with that family because she calls a spade a spade. You know, she's just too outspoken for a woman.
Well,
And you notice she's the only woman in that family that we really see. That's a patriarchy, as opposed to the village life, where the grandmother is the leader. Let's move on. Yvette or Frank, and then somebody else was waving at me. Marie had it.
But Effie was a gentleman and let her go first, and then you skipped me.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not a gentleman.
All right. What I
And then
wanted
Doris.
to, what I wanted,
Okay, well, when
Wait
Byram
a
shot,
second, I was next.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
I could
I will
see.
adjudicate.
No,
Since
I
there are
can
three of you,
see.
I can't cut any one of you in half. So I say Effie should go next. Sorry, Doris. Sorry, Yvette. Effie, then Doris, then Yvette.
You know, I seem to be the only one who is very, very partial, and I liked the character tremendously, Balram. I thought he was a great guy. I mean, true, one should not murder, but except for that one little fact,
Okay.
I thought he was a wonderful guy.
Well, but did you see his intent, what he hoped to accomplish with the murder? Is that why you forgave him?
Yeah. I don't know. It's first of all, it's a story. It's not real life. So you can murder somebody in a story. It may not be good, but you can murder him. And he had a good intention.
That's true. He had a good intention. Okay, so that saved him in your mind. He was doing the right thing. That means was the means did justify the ends, which was to take the money and build a better life for himself. And
you can do things in a movie you can't do in real life.
Of course, that's why we go to movies. It's trial living with no cost except $13.50 if you're a senior. You know, it's like it's trial action. You know, you get to it's make believe for the mind and the soul. You know, and then you get to take a step back from your own reactions, which is my pedagogical approach, and say, well, what were you doing when you thought that? You know, it's like it's a way of understanding ourselves if we examine our reactions. Okay, next I promise Doris.
yeah. Well, when Byram shot Ashok, I jumped. I actually did jump when that gun went off. I was so surprised that he did that he shot him.
He stabbed him with a broken whiskey bottle.
With the glass.
Yeah,
Didn't he shoot him?
No.
No,
did
he
he
stabbed
shoot?
him in the neck.
No.
Balram didn't shoot anybody.
I thought he shot him. Maybe I was looking at something else.
No,
But
we're
I
talking about the
really, he stabbed, I was angry at him that was the one person that was nice to him.
Wow.
And
Was he really
killed
okay?
him.
Well, let me play devil's advocate.
That's mixed up.
Was Ashok really nice to him because he allowed his family to make him sign that phony confession? Or
Well-
is Ashok guilty of the silent syndrome, the Germans who said nothing during the Holocaust, or the white Southerners who let the hangings continue? You know, the bystanders are implicated, aren't they?
No, what he did was wrong to put the blame. pass the blame on to him. But prior to that, I'm saying he was nice to him. I thought
he was.
I
No,
thought he was
nobody
very nice to
will
him.
dispute that. Yeah.
He didn't mistreat him like some of the others. He spoke nicely to him. That's why I said I was kind of angry at him for killing him, because you kill someone that's nice to you, you know.
But you see, the film was meant
to.
The film was meant to make you feel that way.
But
Not everybody
he
will
was
feel
going to
that
be
way.
replaced with another driver.
That's
What'd
true,
you
but
say,
that's just
Abby?
petty. I mean, that was the last straw because he saw his replacement. Yes, the darker skin.
Oh. No, I
You know, but that just gave him final permission. He was headed there anyway.
and he was never punished for that, was he?
No,
he was
got
never
away.
He
disappeared.
went in, he had a big business, and he became a big success, but he got away with the murder. That's not.
He did. He did. Okay, Yvette?
Yeah, you asked before why Asha wouldn't follow Pinky to America. Because if he left India, he'd give up all his money, and he would be, just trying to start out in America and do something. So he wouldn't leave that. And on the other hand, she didn't like what was going on, so she left. That would seem very plausible and sensible to me.
But he wasn't happy in India.
By the way, I also had a tagline. Way back when we were talking about whether a main character, whether he was truly evil or not. I would say he was not, because he's redeemed by when he had the means to not be, he started his company, and in spite of his wealth, treated his employees so well, and even covered up for their own errors and compensating the families. I think it showed that his overall character was not as deep as one might think from just the murder scene alone. You have to put the whole life in context there. He was not truly an evil person, in my opinion.
Doris would agree with you, and so do I. You know, it's like, but you see, movies skirt this edge by making people so complete in our minds. It's hard to see them as all one thing and all another. They're not all evil and they're not all good. And the studio system, in its wisdom, has finally figured out how to give the bad guys some humanity. So before we wipe them out in action movies, you know, it makes the experience a little richer, a little deeper by saying even the bad guys are human. You know, it raises the stakes. And it certainly does here, and it does it extremely well. I mean, we like Ashok because he's between Balram and the family. He insulates him from the abuses of the family, usually. But again, he's still part of the family, and eventually he reaches that precipice where he has to decide, and he's going to replace him. Risa, did you have something? You're muted.
Good.
Who do we blame for the killing of his entire family? Is that on him?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's that newspaper headline Risa's referring to where he wonders what happened to his family, and it says 17 murdered in rural village.
He knows.
I mean, yeah.
He knows who it is. And
that's the consequence.
We don't have a question. We saw the murder. We saw the family wiped out.
Yes, it was there were scenes of it.
So who's responsible? Does he take any blame?
How do we measure that? You know,
I don't know.
You know, there's no scene of introspection. Very early on in the film, it does say the reason these guys keep us in the chicken coop, and that's a metaphor, is because they'll come wipe out our family if we cross them. And sure enough, it happens to him.
And he left the chicken coop knowing what was going to happen. So yeah, I think we have to put some of that on him too.
Well, that's the cost. Is that the cost of heroism, or is that the cost of egotism? You know,
it's the cost of greed.
Greed? You think he did it to be greedy?
His greed. His personal greed over his entire family.
Yeah, but his family did all his family cared about was for him to bring back money.
Of
And then they,
course,
and then they were going to force him to get married.
of course.
Yeah.
That's the way.
Oh,
That's the way of, you're talking about the entire culture of India.
I'm just
the
talking
way the
about
family-
how he was treated by his own family. There seemed to be absolutely no love there. It was just, you know what, he needs to stay in contact to bring money back to them. And
Don't you think that's going on with a lot of the immigrants in this country today?
Yes.
What are they doing cleaning houses for us? Forgive me. They're sending the money back to
their
the
people.
parent, to the
Send
people
it
at
back to
home,
their family.
not to build themselves up better, not to buy a better house, not to get educated for another job, but to work and send that money back.
Yeah.
Same thing.
but there was no gratitude on the other side. He was not treated very well by his family.
Okay.
And I think that partially explains perhaps why he could walk away from them,
So
knowing that they could be killed.
So you see, we've come down to a very granular level. Even family transactions, even families are transactional. People take measurements, you know, and you know, in that culture, the value of your family was how well can you support the others who remained in the village. That's you're a hero if you leave the village and send money back. Fern?
I don't think that ultimately people ever like their saviors very much. The ones who they never feel they get enough money. They feel jealous. They feel it was owed to them. It's very hard to stay grateful, even though a part of you is grateful. A part is resentful. And I think we see it all the time.
So in a way, they are also guilty because they put the pressure on him. They had a stroke of the whiskey bottle against the neck, you know, just like Ashok, you know, did too, and Pinky did too. And, you know, everybody's guilty to some degree because the system touches us.
Well, because they're human. Because when other people have a lot of stuff, it doesn't feel good. And you start to think, well, they've got a lot of stuff. I'm a nice person. They should give it to me. Why shouldn't they?
Well, no one can answer that.
And nobody can answer it. The people who do it say, look, I'm giving it to you because I feel like it, because I want to help you, and you're kind of crappy about it. And it then doesn't feel good to be the giver, and it doesn't feel good to be the receiver.
Right. It's a conflicted dilemma. Iris, you have something to tell us?
You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted, Iris. Quick. It's a good comment, I can tell.
No, it brings me back to the highest levels of charity. We're talking about the 5 levels that we have in Judaism. The highest level is for not to know who gives you and not to know who you give it to, right? Isn't that the highest level? And that's not.
I thought the highest level was you give a man a fishing rod and then you teach him how to fish.
That's a Christian. That's the.
No. Well, maybe the fish is the Christian thing, but it's Hillel. No, there's something about the Maimonides. Sorry, 9 levels of charity.
Okay.
And the best thing is you teach somebody how to help themselves. Okay, did I get that right, Risa? Yeah. Okay. So
anyway, that's what made me think of.
But you see, it's we're all conflicted, you know, between our own agency to get things done for ourselves against getting things done for other people. It's a dilemma, you know. It's very much about who we are, and there are no answers, which is, I think this was a great film for us, and I'm glad it provoked so much discussion. I mean, the resonances are just great to us today. I want to share
One more
Wikipedia
thing,
with you.
can I ask one more question?
Sure. Go ahead.
Of the murdering of his family in the village, was that Ashok's family that set those?
I think he wouldn't have shown it if it weren't. It's like, even if it weren't actually his family in the story, it's like he's thinking about what are the consequences of my actions against my family.
And does Bahram know that his family was murdered?
He doesn't know. He just, we don't know. We
Then it
cannot
doesn't
know
end
that.
it. Then he can go and that's what I would like to see. I would like to see him take some more whiskey bottles and murder his family, a show family.
No, he did enough. In his own mind, he did enough. I don't think that character would murder anybody ever again.
We have the same dilemma about how to handle the unhoused. Okay.
Yeah.
If we give on the street, whatever it is that we give, we're enabling. If we don't enable, how are they going to survive that way? And then maybe they won't be so happy to stay on the streets. And this dilemma happens in India all the time when the little kids come up to the car. And are you supposed to give or are you not supposed to give? Are you supposed to buy the book that was illegally copied and being sold for $5? Or are you not supposed to support that lifestyle? This is the same thing. It's the dilemma of giving and how you feel when you give and what the consequences are of your giving. It's very complicated.
Sounds like the dilemma of right and wrong, though, what you're saying.
Well, we're skirting that issue by talking about.
If you know what right and wrong are in these cases.
But we know murder's wrong. At the same time, there's a philosophical dilemma. I forget exactly what it is about. You're in a tram, and your tram loses its brakes, and you have to decide: do you stay on one line and kill 5 people, or do you turn off on the spur and kill 1 person? It's something like that. I'm not doing it justice, but it's one of these insoluble problems. There are no winners in this game. There just aren't. So I think it's unfair for us to ask, what he felt. At the end, we're just left with, this is what he did. I don't think he'll commit another murder. I think he's committed to his employees. It's a matter of pride for him. But it's a story. It's a fable in a way. It just illustrates, it's more than a fable, because fables are simple about one single moral, but this is about so much. All right, let's close out on our questions, unless you have some after my discussion of the director. Anne, Marina, and then Susie.
Yeah, I just want to comment that a thread throughout that movie, touching on the topic of universality, is the hatred between the Hindus and the Muslims in that movie.
Yes.
And Muslims are second-class citizens, and that was a constant theme throughout the movie. And of course, we don't even have to talk. We don't have to go there with how universal that is.
Yeah, all religions fight, and even within the Muslim religions, you have the Sunnis fighting the Shias, and over the centuries committing murders and crimes. Who's next, Susie?
Oh, I wanted to comment on Bahram.
Marina.
Pardon me?
Okay, quickly, Susie.
I wanted to comment on the actor Bahram, but I can wait. If you want to talk
Marina, go ahead.
I think we should mention the economy of the underlying conditions. To me, it's all very Marxist. The oppressed, there should be steam let out. They somehow rise and kill oppressors. And I don't know if this group discussed Triangle of Sadness, a movie, because it's very similar. It's incarnation of Marxism as well.
Yes, right. It's very much about that, the haves and have-nots. I thought about programming that for us. I felt it was a little too heady, too intellectual. It's kind of theoretical. And now Susie. Susie, did you have a final comment?
Yes, I wanted to comment on what a fine actor Bahram was in this movie. What else we could see him in? Or is he, is he?
I don't know. You can go to imdb.com and check him out. That's a website for movie casts and information about films.
Okay, he did a
So
good job.
IMDb, it's called Internet Media Database, imdb.com. There's a free version that won't get you very far other than the PR releases. And then there's a pro version that will take you into their whole career if you have an interest. So let's learn about the director, Ramin Barani. He did 99 Homes, and he did The Man Who Sold His Skin. And this is it's not his third film. He had done many films before. I got it wrong. He was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His parents were Iranian immigrants. Look at his name. His father was from Shiraz, and he read poetry of a Iranian poet. And he received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Columbia in 1996. He studied filmmaking in Iran, obviously after 96, but lived in Paris for a short time. His first feature was in 2005. I'll look it up so we can talk about it, and premiered at the Venice Film Festival and screened at Sundance. It got international prizes. His second film was called Chop Shop, which played at the Directors Fortnight at Cannes in 2007, and Toronto and Berlin. He was given the Independent Spirit Award of Someone to Watch in 2007. Goodbye Sola was his third feature after Chop Shop. Showed at the Venice Film Festival. Won the International Film Critics Prize in Venice. And it later premiered in Toronto, called A Masterpiece by Roger Ebert and A.O. Scott in the New York Times. Where have all these films been in our lives? We've only seen the last three. Plastic Bag, he made with the voice of Werner Herzog, so on, less important. He's been on juries. His fourth feature film was At Any Price, starring Dennis Quaid, Zac Efron, Tell Your Granddaughters, Heather Graham, and others. Competed in the Venice International Film Festival in 2013. And his fifth film was 99 Homes in 2015. So we've only, observed his recent history over the last 8 years. He was nominated for a Golden Globe in 2015. And he did HBO's Fahrenheit 451, the Bradbury adaptation. And then he did adapted a novel for the White Tiger. And at the 93rd Academy Awards, the film was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, but lost to The Father, which was a play. I don't know about that. This is, much more intricate than that time-traveling play. That was a very good film. Anthony Hopkins plays a man whose Alzheimer's symptoms are progressively worsening, but it's told from his point of view and his sense of time. So things change a lot for the audience, and the dislocation of an Alzheimer's sufferer is translated for us in an audience. So this is one film where your confusion is part of the subject. And I recommended, I wanted to program The Father or Still Alice, another great Alzheimer's film for us. But I know that Alzheimer's is a sensitive issue for many of us. And I will still do that. But if you want to advise me against it, I will. And I'd love to hear your comments. I don't want to call anybody out. It's a very sensitive subject and a very profound subject, which is what drew me to those films. So if you want to process your feelings about that, these films should be seen together. Still Alice is about a young woman in her late 40s who has early onset Alzheimer's. And it's about the impact on her family, her children, and her spouse. And then the Anthony Hopkins film is about the impact on him and his perception of himself. They're really profound films. And I think we need to take a look at them. We had planned before the pandemic to do that with Elizabeth Stearns, who was a University Synagogue member and now a Wilshire Boulevard Temple member, who lost her mother to Alzheimer's and created a foundation called the Judy Fund Judy Foundation to finance research and care for the families of victims of Alzheimer's. And she was going to be our guest that night, along with some experts. We had tried to plan a whole day of Alzheimer's awareness with Rabbi Nanas. So it would be experts and 2 films and, you know, just a day of immersion in that, but the pandemic got in the way. If you think that's a good idea, please let me know. I think it'd be great for the whole congregation to see these films and to hear from top experts in the field. But
well, I'll give my opinion on that.
Yes,
Having
please.
just gone through my wife passing away from Alzheimer, I think that would be great.
Thank you. I was hoping for that, Effie. I didn't want to call that out, but I know my wife's mother passed as a victim of that, and I'm sure some of us know people who have, or families who've lost members. It's going to continue to touch all of us as we age, and it's something to be dealt with. And the movies are a great way of working out your fears and your demons. So that said, we'll try and meet in 2 weeks from tonight in July. I think we're going to see a lovely film with Emma Thompson called The Children Act. And hi, just finishing up. It's about, she plays a judge who has to decide whether or not to force a transfusion into a Christian Scientist boy against his will and his parents' will. It's a lovely, important film about religious freedom and who are we to judge and how can we make life decisions for people. And then it has a great ending. And I believe that's on Amazon Prime, The Children Act. That's the name of a British law that was passed to address this topic. So it's based on a real story, but it's quite fictional. And I was very moved by it. And Emma Thompson could do no wrong. You know, she gets your empathy going from scene 1. So this was a great discussion. I'm so glad.
Did you say that was 2 weeks from today, Jim?
I think so, but I have to
July
confirm it
6th. Yeah.
Yes, I think if it's a bad week for us because of the holiday, we'll see. But I think it's going to be fine. I think Susan Nanas will be in Poland, so that, we'll have to clear it with her and with Hannah. Hannah, will you do that for me? July 6th. You don't have to answer, but I'll write you an email.
The Poland trip is in October, unless this is a different trip.
What?
The Poland trip is in October.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was. She's leaving.
Yeah, because I'm considering going.
All right, well, that'll be a great trip. I wouldn't want you to miss it. But the summer's kind of light, so we should be fine for the 6th and then the 20th. And I look forward to seeing you then. Please bring your movie appetites with you. This was great, the way you all seized on this one. So see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Good night, Jim. Good night, everybody.
Arlene, call me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.